Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Dan, welcome back to the podcast, brother. I love having return guests. You're kind of sitting in that hybrid, and it's something we discussed before we came on just this morning, was around you've spent a very long career in the thing, doing the thing, but then you've also spent, as people will know from our first conversation, a lot of time in the weeds, looking at the academia, looking at the logic, looking at the why behind stuff, and now you've got a career worth of experience to be able to not unpick it as such, but be able to go, okay, so what did that actually mean? How was that useful to me? And did I even think I interpreted that? A conversation we had the other day was about people's interpretations about some of the decision-making models. And this is something that's going to form a big part of our conversation today. We're going to look at some of the legacy documents around decision-making models. We're going to look at sort of some of the evolution or the reinvention. Some stuff, in my words, not yours, as been reinvented for the sake of reinvented. Like some people like change for the sake of change. Some of the change has been useful, but for people coming brand new into the services now and going through those level ones, level twos, or even people coming in at that station manager level, we spoke a little bit about that the other day. Some of the background on these decision maker models would be super useful. So I know you sent me over some stuff which is really, really helpful for us to have a little bit of a map to go through. And I wanted us to start with, in fact, maybe we could start with your first introduction to incident command. Like when you first did your level one, the kind of models that you were aware of then, how decision making, big jobs, high stress decision making was sort of introduced to you.
Okay, so I guess for me, Pete, to answer sort of your last question first.
I always ask three questions in one, is my problem.
No, it's all good. So I guess for me, as we talked about the last time that was on, I joined the 2nd of January 1990. Now, it took me till 1997 to, I think that's right, in 97 before I thought I better start taking my exams here and start to seek progression. So I did my LFs, my subs and station officers exams. That would have been 97, 98, 99. I think I'm right in saying that. I need to check back. But it'll be there or thereabouts. So my first sort of exposure, if you like, to some of the broader academia, some of the sort of the written doctrine was very much studying for my exams. But actually around that time, I think it was probably late 90s where the first edition of the Incident Command guidance was published. And I actually can't remember at that point whether or not the London Fire Brigade decision-making model, which I'm going to say dates back to 1994. I may be wrong about that, Pete, but I think that's when it dates back to. It was only really the third edition of the Incident Command, essentially the Incident Command Guidance, third edition, 2008, where there is the Appendix 4 sets out the London Fire Brigade decision-making model, but it maps it across to the process of dynamic risk assessment. So for me, that's probably the first sort of, thinking back now, I clearly studied in this space, but my sort of memory and recollection is all around doing the exams and then doing the developmental courses at the fire service college as it was. And back then it was, they just transitioned from, there was the JO and the JOA. So junior officer advancement, I think is what that stood for, to the crew command and then the watch command 1 and watch command 2. And they were the courses that I did. And I don't recall there being a huge, there was input on decision making there, but I'll be honest with you, Pete, I can't remember a great deal. It clearly didn't stick.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Speaking to a few people back then, my understanding was it was much more choosing tactics and things like that, as opposed to actually assisting the incident commander with their decision-making process. It was more about, and you'll perhaps be able to shine a light from perhaps some of the military elements of this. What do you think decision-making looked like before that? Was it more just like put in place these foundations and choose a tactic? I'm sure it was more, it had more of a structure to that, because this stuff goes way back before the 90s and the 80s. But I wonder when there started to be some sort of nationally recognised or even advisory decision-making models, because decision-making is very much an art form, isn't it? It's a very personal thing based on your own confidence, risk appetite, assertiveness, whatever it might be. So I wonder how much, because leadership's just an endless conversation, isn't it? It's an ever-evolving beast, and it's relative to the sector and the individuals that you work with. But decision-making on the incident ground, like, the dynamics of fire and things in our situations, whilst now it's proliferated out to RTC and rope and, flooding and all this sort of stuff, those models, I wonder what they look like kind of before the 90s and 80s, or even if there even was anything. Imagine an incident command course in the 60s. I don't know what that would look like.
Again, Peter, clearly there must have been, but I can only go back and based on my own recollections here. I think really for me, my point of reference was the London Fire Brigade decision-making model, which essentially had two fundamental domains, the deciding and the acting domains, if you like, but essentially was the incident information, resource information, hazard and safety information. Think, prioritise objectives, determine your plan, communicate, control, and then that evaluation loop. That for me was essentially what, when I can think back to actually this being a point of reference for me, that was definitely my sort of guiding principles, if you like, and I can talk to a lot of detail about the individual components of that, and I'm sure we'll explore that. It would have been, I'm going to say 2015, when with the transition to National Operational Guidance, and it would have been Sabrina, I think Phil Butler, maybe a few others had done some research. I'm going to say I think it was through Cardiff University, where there was the evolution, if you like, from the London Fire Brigade decision-making model from sort of the 90s that found its way into the incident command guidance, and as I say, was probably the best point of reference I've got was Appendix 4 of the third edition, the 2008 edition of the guidance, where it mapped across to the process of dynamic risk assessment. But then there was I guess what became, I think I'm right in saying, the decision control process, but essentially it was all the same components of the London Fire Brigade decision-making model, but they were framed around 3 domains: situation, plan, action. So situation contained incident information, resource information, your risk information. The plan domain was your objectives, your tactical priorities, and then your operational tactics. And then into the action domain is the communication of that, and then the control of how that's being implemented. But the decision control process, as I sort of interpreted that, was the decision control overlay of the why you're doing it, what you expect to happen, and what you anticipate the benefits versus the risk. And if you think about some of the input that's contained within, and it's still within the foundation guidance and also within the national operational guidance today. Essentially, the two types of decision making, this intuitive and this analytical. And I guess my simplistic sort of interpretation of the decision control process was this overlay of this why, the what you think's going to happen, and do the benefits justify the risk. It was almost a check and balance for the intuitive decision maker who might not really have worked through the three domains versus the analytical decision maker that you would think would have done. Because
those three questions are like the coach over the shoulder, aren't they? Like when you have your incident command reaccreditations, it's that pause then after you've done your 360s, got your information, decided tactical plan, you've started getting on with something. It's that pause for thought when someone, if you're having a coach session, they're saying, right, tell me what you expect to happen in the next 20 minutes. And do you know what I mean? That's where I feel like that central part of the new model does zoom out for that holistic self-awareness thing, because otherwise you can get stuck in that vortex of doing the same thing, expecting the same result. And I think Ben Lee, do you know who Ben Levy is?
Yes, yeah.
He's a great man.
Officer, yeah.
Tell you what, yeah, I had a good chat with him the other day. He's coming on the podcast soon, and fascinating bloke. And he said, like, making pumps 10 at a high rise doesn't solve the problem. He said, because you just throw more firefighters at the thing. Once firefighters start putting water on a fire, they'll just keep putting water on a fire. Just more people doing the same thing is not a better tactic. And he was talking more specifically around high rises and when we should switch to evacuations and when the buildings failed and all this. So a slightly different conversation, but the same analogy applies in the fact that just throwing more people at doing the same thing. What are you expecting to happen from this? Do you know what I mean? Why are you doing it? And what do you think is going to happen in the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? I think that was a useful insert for me.
Look, I as we discussed the last time out, I would every single day, every single morning, first thing I would do, log on to the mobilising system, review the incidents, or even as incidents were ongoing throughout the day, I would be looking at, if I wasn't en route to them, I'd be looking at the incident log, I'd be monitoring on the ops channel. And I think I alluded to this the last time we spoke, Pete. The speaking from my own experience here, I won't name any names, but this is a fairly general statement here. But the almost default assistance message that I was sort of familiar with from the monitored audit review work that I would do every single day was this: make pumps 4. Irrespective of what the incident was, it was make pumps 4. And I would often, after the fact, or if I'd turned up at the incident at an appropriate time, pull that incident commander, would normally be the initial incident commander. And bear in mind, you've normally got a 2-pump PDA to these things. I've already got 2 fire engines there for the benefit of people who I'll try not to assume too much knowledge of the listener there. So the question I would always ask is, very much relating it back to either the decision-making model or the decision control process, because essentially it's one and the same for me. The component parts are all the same. They're just reordered slightly differently. The question I'd ask is well, what objectives were those extra 2 pumps? What was it that you were going to get them? What is it you thought they were going to do? Essentially, what I was driving is, what was your plan? What was your tactical plan? Because I think, if I'm honest, I think a lot of people it was make pumps 4 because it was the first thing that come into their head. It's just, I'm not even sure that's recognition prime decision making. I just think it's almost the default. Whether or not because make pumps 4 was the trigger where you get a station manager mobilised, I'm not even sure it was that well thought through. So for me, I don't think there was ever anything wrong with the LFB legacy decision making model. I just don't think people used it. Was my personal view, and I've had conversation with Andy Rowe about that, and I think we were. It's not for me to speak on Andy's behalf, but I think we were in the same space. There was absolutely nothing wrong with that model. People just didn't use it, or maybe they just didn't understand it.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the centre of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity in the brand new MSA connected firefighter platform. Now back to the show. So take us through, I think that'd be really, really useful. Take us through, because we could both read it and they're just words on a page. My wife could read this and she's lived vicariously through me for the past 19 years in the fire service, operating at different levels in different places, different countries a little bit sometimes. So she might be able to articulate some things to the layman. And even she would probably do that sort of process when she turns up to a class full of students at the yard when she's about to teach horse riding or something like that. She's probably doing something very similar about the hazards on that place. But what those independent parts mean to each individual, if you don't really get a full assimilation, if you don't get all the juice out of each element, it immediately diminishes your ability to create effective priority objectives, doesn't it?
Look, completely. And I think there probably is some merit just to consider each of the, and probably use the decision control process, given that it's current, its extent. But as I say, I go back to it doesn't differ substantially. The component parts are the same as the legacy LFB model, but that's with the addition of the decision control overlay, in my view. Not that, let me be clear, that's my view. I'm not. It would be for others. It would, the people who designed it to comment definitively what their intention was, but that's always the way I'd sort of interpreted it. But if we look at the three domains, we just we can work through them quickly, and maybe if I can contextualise it with a couple of incident examples.
Please do.
So you take the situation domain. Okay, so incident information. Now, for me, as soon as you get mobilised, as soon as either you get the tip sheet off the tannoy at the station or it comes up on the MDT, incident information. I'll give it as an example. Let's say you're initially mobilised to a house on fire. Let's say. Now, a house on fire could vary from a 2 up, 2 down terrace to a mansion, couldn't it?
Yeah.
There's a fairly broad spectrum of what a house on fire could be. Now, there's some additional information you're going to get there, which will be the address. And if you know your station area, let's assume it's your own station area you get mobilised to, then you would hope that, that there are further cues then, aren't there, that let you, right, okay, so it's a house on fire on that particular road. So it's more likely than not to be 2 up, 2 down, or it's more likely not to be a mansion, whatever. And so it goes.
You can go, right, I know that street is student accommodation.
Absolutely.
It's going to be mid-terrace. Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of parking on the street. There's going to be all this sort of stuff.
Of course, all that stuff, because that's based then around your topography. And there's a point I'm going to make here, Pete, the real fundamental, more so when we get to the sort of the hazard and risk information piece. But that's all about a lot of that stuff, right? A lot of that stuff. If you're out on your station area, you're doing whatever it is you're doing, whether you're doing your hydrant walks, you might be doing your SSRI, you might be doing your home safety visits, whatever it is, there is an opportunity every single time for you to start gathering that additional contextual information. And again, there's another point I'm going to make here about being fully immersed in some of this stuff. But every single time, every time you step out into your station ground, there's an opportunity, isn't it? Whatever you're doing is to be looking at that, right, absorb it all. Because there's information there that's really, really critical potentially in this context. Right, risk and hazard information. I'm sort of jumping because in the box, in the situation where you get resource information next, which by and large in the first instance when you're getting turned out is your PDA. And you'll know if it's house fire, it's likely 2 pumps. If it's house fire person's reported, it'll be 3. You know what? You'll get a good say. You know what's coming with it.
Again, just for our non-emergency services listener, that's predetermined attendance. So what resources from that service, be that fire engines or other types of vehicles they might send. Yeah.
My bad, Pete. Well challenged. So then you move into your risk info, your hazard risk information. For me, that's fundamental. Like, that is the fundamental bit. Links into a little bit about the incident information piece that we just talked about previously. That hazard and risk information, that's where having to do the hard yards comes in. That's where there's actually no shortcuts with that bit. Because in order to have that information, to have that knowledge, you've got to have studied. You've got to have, you've got to have immersed yourself in the doctrine. You've got to have that underpinning knowledge. Clearly, you've got to have that experiential knowledge as well. You know, in the way that's the contextual application of sort of hazard knowledge, control measures.
I think this becomes even more applicable for one of our conversations with firefighters in FDNY and also London to an extent, because the variations of each independent premises at some of these places, the access routes, the external staircases, the complexity of these buildings. This one's got a basement that's now become a restaurant, that's now become a thing. London's a great example for it for the UK listener, but FDNY especially, like, because their stations might only be a mile or 2 away from each other, but the complexity in each of those boroughs or estates or areas is massive. So their topography needs to be so sharp.
So look, there's 2 elements to that, Pete. And again, we're jumping around a little bit, but it's fine. The way I've always viewed this is, and this is when setting up national operational guidance, you'll recall the last discussion we had about the hazard and risk control statement. That is generic. So that's almost your foundation layer, is that generic hazard and risk control knowledge, so that your generic hazard knowledge and your generic knowledge of the control measure tactics or your tactical options. The next layer to that is the site-specific risk information. So that's where you've got that generic knowledge, which is the stuff that you're gonna fully absorb yourself in, that as your bread and butter. But then that's where that addition, that's where the value of, like, Section 72D of the Fire and Rescue Services Act, the legal duty to gather information, the gathering of site-specific risk information. There will still be, ultimately, they'll still all be generic hazards, but it's the context within which they present in that particular.
Because they might automatically discount some of your tactical options.
Possibly, or they might confirm them.
Well, like when people say, oh, London's bought the biggest ALP in the world, and you go, okay, there's very limited places you can even deploy that. As one example, this is my words, not yours, but having spoken to a couple of the TL and aero ladder experts, if you will, in LFB, they're like, it was a bit of a appeasement of the public, because they can only fit it in something like 6 or 7 stations, and then the places that you can even deploy it. So that is not actually a tactical option for a lot of premises that you're going to go to.
No, and that's right, but that's where your SSRI would determine that. And you would think that your predetermined attendance, part of your strategic risk assessment, that's where those sort of considerations would be. If you like, your analysis of task, and as you say, so what tactical options are reasonably deployable? Because as you say, you might have a 42-metre aerial appliance, but if you can't get the thing down the road, or there isn't access, then and even if there is, there is then the issues. Well, okay, what sort of water supply can you? Are you?
Yeah. Can you even support that?
and again, I've got some contextual examples from actual incidents that I think we'll refer back to. Which
I did a similar piece of work. Sorry, my ADHD brain drags me all over the place. But I did a similar piece of work. And we had some flooding at the area that I worked recently, and everyone was going, "Oh, boats this, boat that." And then you get your USAR or your rescue station to sort of advise on that, and they go, "Well, there's nowhere to launch the boat from. You just see water and say boat." And go, okay, where would you want us to launch it from? Do you know? And that's where you need, again, that team, like an ALP team, to go and assess possible locations they could pitch from. You need a boat team to go and say, right, where could we deploy this fig? And I'm sorry, I will constantly drag us down rabbit holes, but bring us back. We're still in situation. So incident information, recent information, risk information.
But look, everything you're saying there, Pete, everything you are saying is valid in this particular domain. It's all valid. It's risk information in the broadest sense, and to a degree, using the aerial appliance example, it's resource information. Because yes, you've got a capability, but then can it be deployed? Because if the answer is no, then that's one less tactical option that you may be able to.
But that's where I think some of our direct entry are going to slip up. And I say it with the greatest of respect. It's an echo from a previous conversation. It's like, unless you've seen that from the firefighter level up, or even had some interaction before it, you're just going to see these as tools in the toolbox and go, hey, call one of them. And you go, what? Have you even looked at the incident ground? Where the hell do you think you're going to put it? But I know I'm dragging us into a different conversation yet again, but that's where that doesn't work. That sort of experiential knowledge, like we spoke about before, being that hybrid, someone such as yourself, it's difficult if you've not had that ground level input on these.
Yeah, look, I don't think that I genuinely believe I can only speak for myself here, but I spent 7 years as a firefighter at a reasonably busy fire station back in Merseyside back in the day, so very fortunate to experience a wide variety of incidents. So as a firefighter, sort of riding in the back, and very much, I was extremely keen, as you can probably imagine. So, I was absolutely chasing it every time. So fortunate in that sense, and similarly very fortunate as an LF, as a sub, and as a station officer. As a station officer worked in out Kirby, Croxteth, Liverpool City, Kirkdale, Central Liverpool. Very, very lucky to work on station areas where
Liverpool again's got some complex buildings, very complex, very rich in culture and history. But like the streets, the beautiful. We were in Liverpool for the British Firefighter Challenge stuff. It's a beautiful city. But there's so like rabbit holes and warrens and cafes and underground music venues and loads of stuff going on in Liverpool.
And I guess like any UK city, Pete, that sort of brings you back into your situation domain. Your incident information, your risk information about knowing your ground. It's that. Mm-hmm. But I also think, I suppose I think the title of this podcast is Managing Big Incidents. I actually think to be good at managing big incidents, I think you've got to be able to manage little incidents. And you've got to be able to do that. Because the majority of big incidents started off as a little incident. And actually, as well as I do, often you will win it and lose it with the actions of the first attending officer in charge.
Yeah.
So... Look, I guess stepping into that to sort of keep it on track. I mean, to step it into the plan domain. I was very fortunate to. I worked with a colleague, a guy called Chris Howard. He was an area manager, and Chris was absolutely superb officer. He's very. I never actually worked with Bill Goff from West Mids, but. He's very much how I imagine Bill would have been on the incident ground. And this guy, Chris, he was so across this, the decision-making model, the decision control process. It was his Bible. He lived by it. And I learned a great deal from him. And, he would be very much, it was the information gathering piece, the whole situation domain. but he was big on, right, set your tactical object. What are your objectives? What are your objectives? Because that ultimately will determine your overall plan. And actually your objectives determine your resource information. So going back to the make pumps for as your default, what objectives is it that you are seeking to achieve? Again, I don't want to. I'm just going to make a comment. There was an extremely large, high-profile incident that people will be aware of. I won't say which one it is, but at which the comment around the Make Pumps 20 message, a comment was made that the command team, yeah, it looks like a 20 pump fire. Now, the challenge, my immediate challenge to that would have been, can you tell me what a 20 pump fire looks like?
The team here at the podcast are extremely excited to announce our brand new partnership with Patrol Store UK. Patrol Store have been serving the UK's police, fire and emergency communities and first responder sector since 2008, providing leading brands such as Hikes, Magnum, 511, Nebo, Op Zulu, Highlander, AKU and many, many more of our favourites. They are now also supplying bespoke uniform, PPE and station workwear to fire services around the UK. So for all our listeners that are part of your USAR, your HEART team, your ISAR team, your armed response teams, your fire investigation, your NALO, your hazmat and all of the training departments that have got your own budgets, be sure to get the absolute best for your team at a realistic price by contacting Aaron and the team at Patrol Store and referencing the Firefighters podcast. Patrol Store will also be taking part in our listener competition giveaways as well as providing unique discounts to podcast listeners. So for people that are always asking about Hikes boots as an example, that is one unique discount code that is coming to you very soon through Patrol Store. We've also got some incredible bags. I mean, the Op Zulu bags are a game changer. So you know the really Gucci and expensive tactical black bags that everyone's using in CrossFit workouts and taking to the gym and taking to stations? Well, they've basically got that, but it's made better and costs less, because they're not slapping some Gucci expensive brand name on it and it's giving you what you want on a first responder salary. Be sure to keep your eyes in the notes of the episodes for links to unique offers and discount codes. And if you're looking to buy well and buy once, be sure to get in the notes and head over to Patrol Store UK. Now back to the show. One of my first jobs that I was in charge of, was a 4,000 bales of hay. I first started at an on-call station. And when I saw this thing, as I was coming over the horizon, it was 4,000 bales of hay all on fire. That's enormous for anyone that looks like a mansion fully involved. I don't mean fully involved like the roof. I mean everything you can see is fire. Now you could look at that, the public might look at that and go, you're going to need... Well, actually, no, because our tactical objective here is just we're going to surround it and get the fire surround and get it under control and babysit it for a couple of days, realistically. So it's a very simplistic incident for giving, wind direction and blah, 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 blah. But like you say, off the face of it, what does a 20 pump fire look like to you? What do you mean? Paint a picture for me.
And I think it speaks to this is the analytical decision making rather than the intuitive. Because actually the analytical would be, okay, take your example of the bales of hay. I'll use the bushfire example. When I was over in Victoria, the chief officer of the Forest Fire Management Victoria, a guy called Chris Hardman, who's actually from Kent. Chris, great guy, and he was the chief officer of Forest Fire Management Victoria. And because I had no exposure at that point to bushfires, so I'd done the wildfire thing, which, let's be clear, there's no comparison between what you would face in the UK versus you're going to face out in Australia, just because of the sheer size and the climate and everything else. And so I was very much sort of getting into Chris, look, okay, how do you deal with these incidents? Right, I know how to deal with in the urban environment, but this is my thought process. These are my tactical options, so on and so forth. How do you deal? How do you deal with bushfires? Given your experience, what Chris said to me was that it's bulldozers that put bushfires out, and what he meant by that is you just create control lines. I know you don't just sounds like it's an easy thing. You know, it's a very complex, time-consuming, and very arduous thing. But much in the same way as with your bales of hay, you know, if think about the triangle of combustion, we just put aside the chemical chain reaction for the fourth element of that. But the fuel piece, right? You can't control the oxygen because it's out in the open. You're struggling to control the heat bit because the fire's already started and you've got limited amounts of water at your disposal because it's in the middle of wherever it's in the middle of, but it's not close to any water supply. So the only realistic thing tactically then that you can do, if you've got access to, say, in this, you might have a tractor or whatever it may be, but it's like...
Yeah, we got a few Manitous involved once you got the first few bales off, but then you've also got these things, they're force 5 stories high, and a hay bale is a heavy thing. When you see these things fall and you've got firefighters working by, because when we had the Manitous in place, you often put extended hose reels in to cool the lines on the Manitous so that they don't, you know, the hydraulic lines don't blow and then some guy stuck in his tractor. But you're right, yeah. So you've got that fire separation element and trying to create these lines. Thatch fires are a good example as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and if you go back into the bushfire example, essentially, you know, it's a okay. There is fire in the environment. The weather conditions are what they are. You got wind direction, you know, the relative humidity, the sort of the fuel state, all of those issues that your FBAN, your fire behaviour analysis will be giving you all that sort of information. But then you're going to make a decision. Where do we make the stand? Where do we put the control line in? And probably backburn from that point to consume the fuel. You know, essentially you're sacrificing that. You know you've lost it, and actually, it doesn't get much. Sometimes it doesn't actually get much more complicated than that. You know, and I know that's a real oversimplification.
It's not. I've had some great conversations with smoke jumpers, and people don't know, like they don't deploy with a 1,800 litre tank. You know, they deploy with some backburning equipment, some hose basically. I mean, when I say hoe, I mean a hoe like a garden hoe. They cut a fire line, they backburn, and then that's it. They try and contain it.
So, if I give you one example of the biggest incident they'd had in Melbourne for quite a long time. So it was August 2018. And as it happened, I was actually on a couple of weeks leave because my wife and the children had come over because we just sort of bought a house. They were still in the UK waiting to come out and join me, but they were over for a couple of weeks and we were just moving into new house before I think they then came out properly in the October. Anyway, we have at that time I think China had stopped taking. Some of the Australia would export sort of hazardous waste out to China for it to get reprocessed or whatever. But for whatever reason, China, I think, had stopped taking it. So what had happened is the criminal gangs in Melbourne had exploited this. And what they'd done was they'd taken out short-term leases on huge industrial premises out in the western suburbs and just stacked them full of essentially what was illegal waste. So there was all sorts in them. You name it. There was all sorts in them. And these places would be rammed full. That they took the money, whatever, pay a lease for 3 months, and then off they go, they disappear. And of course we became aware of these. And it was only a matter of time before we were going to get fires in them. And sure enough, on this particular occasion, I'm going to say it was from memory, I think it was a Friday. It was like a Friday morning. So they had this. It's a huge complex. I'm going to say it was probably maybe 200 metres by 100 metres, something of that nature, rammed full of this illegal disposed waste. And it's well alight. So they end up they used the greater alarms system out there rather than make up. So it was an 8th alarm. That's there or thereabouts. That's make pumps faulty, there or thereabouts. So it was a fair old size of incident. And the guy was the acting chief. Thankfully, rings me up, just lets me know about it. So this is first thing in the morning. So I'm just finishing in the gym. Rings me, lets me know about it. I'm like, okay, describe it to me then, which he does. And I'm like, okay, so we've got an 8 alarm, we've got 40 odd pumps there. What are they doing? What's your tactical plan? What is the plan? Now he wasn't on scene. We had other officers were there on scene. So what's the plan? He said, well, I think they had something like 4 or 5 aerials there, and essentially they were just trying to surround the thing. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, is it fully involved? And he's like, yeah, it's fully involved. I'm like, you sure? The whole thing is fully involved? It's like, yeah, it's fully involved. I'm like, okay, describe the construction to me. It's like a portal frame type. So essentially the roof's going to collapse inwards. Now, in Australia, much in the same way as the UK, the purpose of a roof predominantly is to keep water out. You know what I mean? So,
I know where you're going.
You know what I mean? So, and I'm like, right, think about Paul Greenwood's fireground calculations now, right? Surface area times 5. But bear in mind, there's a limit. That only really holds good up to like 600 square metres. And we've got here something like, I'm going to say this is probably 20,000 square metres, you know, it's 100 metres by 200. So on that basis, you'd need 100,000 litres of water a minute that would all have to be penetrating and actually to achieve any sort
for it to be effective,
you know what I mean? Now, I know for a fact, you know, the water supply in that area, like you were not getting 100,000 litres a minute out of any, you ain't getting that out of anywhere, you know, not in any city, you know, unless you got an open water supply. So as it was, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to that. Now, I was probably about, at this point where I lived, was a fair hour way out of Melbourne because you couldn't afford to live in Melbourne, it was too expensive.
Everything's a big drive over there, isn't it? I remember John McDonough and stuff. He's like, yeah, it's a regular 2 and a bit hour drive to go from one station to another.
The tyranny of distance is a thing, Pete. Yeah, it's a thing. So anyway, I get in my car like hot-footed over there. So I'm driving down the M1 back towards Melbourne. You see this huge plume. It's clearly this is a massive job. Clearly. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to head over there and I'm going to meet up with the command team on the incident management team on site, and we'll sort of step through it. But you know, I'm like, there is no prospect we're going to put that out. You know that, don't you? There is no way we are going to put that out. If it is as you are describing it to me, there is no way we're going to put it out. But we'll cause a hell of a lot of environmental damage with all sorts of water runoff, which does concern me. So anyway, I goes out there, and sure enough, you know, they all make 8th alarm, fire engines everywhere. There's you know, there's various sort of from hand lines to ground monitors to aerials. You know, none of which is having any real great effect that I can see. So I do a 360, and at the rear of this factory, there is I noticed there's a creek. It's called Stony Creek, and which is a watercourse which runs into the River Yarra, which runs right the way through Melbourne and out into Port Phillip Bay. And there's this horrific, huge muddy puddle with this horrific sheen on top, and it's just draining away into this creek. And I'm thinking, right, this is not good. This is not good. So I'm like, look, we need to stop this. We need to knock everything off here. Yes, we can protect the exposures, but we just need to leave this. We are far better just letting this burn out, because we're never going to put it out, but we are potentially going to cause some really significant environmental damage. So that's what we need to do.
Which is going to hit us as a humanity much quicker. It's this horrible thing, like, because it feels like people, you're making a decision there to sacrifice the atmosphere or whatever, but it's like there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What's the worst decision?
What's the least worst option? Absolutely. So in the incident the incident management team meeting, so the multi-agency meeting, so it's a unified command system over there, same as what our colleagues in America use. And we've got so Vic Police are there, Ambulance Victoria. We've got the EPA, so the Environmental Protection Agency. And what I'm saying is, I'm like, they're all fixated on the plume. And I get it, the plume is horrific. I get it, it's such a visual thing. And in the end, I find myself saying to them, look, right, it's this simple. Right, you can either have a plume and a load of dead fish and your watercourse compromised, or you can just have a plume.
Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial and fire training professionals. Now, next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection, this is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show. But they don't want to hear that, because places like Australia, and we actually had this in the UK, I didn't realise this. I was reading Alistair Campbell's book, and they were talking about when we had mad cow disease and we were burning all the cows, like all the dead animals, and we were burning them all. It really hit tourism quite hard, supposedly, because the pictures going around the globe was UK's on fire. No one go to the UK. And I imagine for Australia, very, very rich for tourism and stuff like that, the city's on fire. No one wants to come to the city. We don't really think about, well, just put it out, and if it kills all the fish and we have to dump a load more chemicals in to rebalance our drinking water, it's tomorrow's problem.
I'm not even sure I'm not even sure that okay. necessarily would have been the environment.
But like you say, the eye gets drawn to the plume, doesn't it? And the city's on fire.
Exactly. The focus was on the plume. And you know what I said, we would be far better off it, going back to Chris Hardman's bulldozer analogy. It's bulldozers had put that out. We could create control lines, and because, the fact is we were just pouring, I don't know, we were maybe, let's say we were putting 10,000, maybe 20,000 litres of water on it, possibly a minute. Very little of that would be penetrating into, because of the way in which the collapse had occurred, and even the reach of the aerial streams, there was...
Yeah,
it was just, it's the definition of insanity thing, isn't it? You just keep doing the same thing, think you're going to get a different result. and I guess it's, I use that as an example just because it was like, can we just stop a second? And I had an incident on Merseyside, Kirby, in a place that manufactured MDF, where... It's closed now, and we had a number of quite serious incidents there, and not all of which were fires. Actually, we had a few horrific fatalities there as well. It was not great. This one particular time, we got a very large fire there, and I think I'm right in calling that the where the chip, the sort of
the extraction units,
that which. They were bins, basically, massive big bins full of this.
It's always a problem with those places. There's sawdust and the extraction units don't get maintained, and I've been to a number of them as well. They're just waiting to happen all the time.
Yeah, and so it's one of these bins full of this product is on fire. I'm like, look, we're never going to put that out. We should just leave it. Just protect the exposures. Just let it burn out. It's not even as if we can cover the it's not even as if because we looked at the old anti-ventilation. To what extent can we limit the oxygen? It would still have it would still have smouldered away, but at least we could have, we could have restricted the. And it was that one of them.
Then you get some massive blankets now. You've seen some of the massive blankets coming out for, I think I saw one for a HGV, because I know they've got them for EV now, haven't they? Yeah. They're trying to get massive ones to drag over an EV. I think I saw one that someone tried to design for a HGV. I was like, wow, that thing's got to be half the size of a football field.
But you know what? Take EVs as a really good example. The amount of unless you can get direct access to the battery and thermal runaway with some sort of piercing nozzle, which may well be problematic,
may make it worse, yeah. Well, they're the great analogies of putting more water on a roof when the fire's in the basement. You're squirting water at the top of an EV fire, and you're like, the battery bank's all in the base of the vehicle. What is it you think you're going to solve here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you say, the blanket's very simplistic technology, but triangular combustion. So I get it. I understand there's elements of oxidizing agents within the batteries anyway. So they're gonna, but nonetheless, if you can limit the spread beyond the battery itself, then that for me that just strikes me as being a far more sensible solution than just hundreds of thousands of of litres of water, which you've then got all the runoff issues with. So, but again, it comes back to having those your fire files, to quote Chris Howard, that underpinning knowledge. You've got that. I know what my tactical options are, and fundamentally those tactical options you can deploy. The whole good. If I can't, it's the triangular combustion. You just deal with one or all elements of the triangle, and in the end you're going to put it out, aren't you? So,
what's my easiest way to collapse it? Yeah. Look at that versus our standard go-to media options, which is often water, foam, whatever it might be. It's like, no, what I really want to do is collapse it. How can I collapse it? And often turning it away or turning it into a fuel control fire and reducing that fuel. Again, it limits itself to certain incident analogies, but it's one that's often less thought of for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of these incidents, Pete, tend to be large incidents. It's things like the big recycling places. It's. And I know, I know it isn't always easy, and there may be some circumstances where it just is impractical to create the control lines. And I think in those circumstances, it is then back into that environmental trade-off around, okay, we'll have a plume versus the water runoff, because as you'll know yourself, with a lot of the waste recycling places, very quickly a crust is formed over the bulk of the fuel anyway, and the water can't penetrate, and it will run off, in any event. So, I just think it's maybe it's not even a new way of thinking, but maybe just a different way of thinking, and it comes back to the decision making process. What are your objectives? What's your tactical plan? And then that decision controls what is it you're going to do, right? Why are you going to do it? What do you think's going to happen? Because if it is just pouring a load of water on the thing, well, is that going to be effective?
Help us understand as we move. I know we've tiptoed around it. It's my fault for jumping all over the place. So as we moved into that second sequential block around the plan, could you just help people understand the difference between an objective, a tactical priority? We've loosely pointed at all of them here, but we haven't necessarily articulated them as such. So if we use perhaps the job back in Merseyside or anything, just push each of those parts of our conversation into what we would have considered an objective, what was a tactical priority versus an operational tactics, because a lot of those words are interchangeable. And again, you do see it in loads of rooms where it's buzzword bingo, and people could tell you exactly what's on here, but they're just saying the words. How do they know when they've switched? Like in our conversation, we're having a JESIP meeting, whatever, we're talking about our objectives right now, then we're going to shift to our tactical priorities, and then I, as an independent service, might walk away with my own operational tactic aligned to the operational tactics of police, ambulance, whoever. Like just take us to those three as you see them differently. Okay,
so if I'll try and contextualize this for an instance. So I think I'm right in saying the last major incident I was in charge of here as Chief of Merseyside was the Liverpool Echo Arena car park fire. Which it was New Year's Eve 2017 going into 2018. So 7-storey car park adjacent to the Liverpool Echo. I think it's called the M&S Bank Arena now. So, but it's a big arena basically, which on this occasion it was hosting the International Horse of the Year show, the matinee performance during the afternoon. Then was the evening performance, which and you got this 7-storey car park, and on the south aspect there is a 7-storey block of flats with a 4-metre separation from the actual car park itself. And then on the east exposure, there is another 7-storey block of flats, again with this 4-metre separation. Go figure. And then on the north exposure, you've got the Jury's Inn Hotel, albeit there was a greater degree of separation. And we initially get mobilised to a vehicle on car fire on level 3. And as ever,
was it a Land Rover that started? I think I read it yesterday.
Rover, yeah. So, as ever with these things, there's all this social media footage of this Land Rover on fire with people filming it, not bothering to dial 999. Yeah. So, but by the time Liverpool City and Toxteth turn up, this thing's fully involved and has spread to a number of other vehicles either side. So they're not just dealing with the single vehicle on fire. Now, I get notified of this one on the Make Pumps 8. Now, typically, the mobilising order in Merseyside, the fire control, the mobilising officer or the officer in charge wouldn't notify the principal officer until the area manager had mobilised to the incident. But the OIC on this particular day, very experienced officer, a lady called Linda Hazelhurst, had the good sense. She rang me up and said, "Look, just to let you know, it's Make Pumps 8 at the moment, but we've got a fire in the multi-storey car park. Vehicles on fire, multi-storey car park, Liverpool Echo Arena. Bear in mind, New Year's Eve, Liverpool City Centre." I'm like, okay, thanks.
Busy.
Appreciate you. Thank you for giving me the heads up. I'm going to go to that. So
you must never. I bet none of your subordinates ever got to do any of the fun jobs.
PT did. I will come to that. I'll come to that. Pete. I probably.
I think it's quite rare to have a chief fire officer listening to main scheme radios. I think that's rare. We know when they shifted to, and I'm sorry to take us off this rabbit hole in a minute, but when they shifted to the Intel style radios, where I think they're like phone calls, aren't you? You have to pay for every single transmission or something like that, versus the open main scheme radio old school ones that we used to have, because we used to have them on in the bays all the time. And like you say, even if you're working in an office, you'd like to have one on. And I remember a mass message going out to a couple of services, maybe 10 years ago, maybe, I don't know, but they were like, switch them off because it costs us money. I think that was a real mistake, because like you say, brand new firefighters or even officers, or certainly brand new firefighters, used to sit in the bays and listen to jobs, and it was great. Do you know what I mean?
I think you're right, Pete. I do think with the I think there is some sort of a charging regime, because clearly with the ESMCP, the transition away from it.
Yeah, my terminology is all wrong, but they moved to something where it basically made it like a mobile phone or something.
You're right. You are correct. I think there was some sort of pay by sort of transmission type thing.
Yeah.
But look, it in this instance, so the fire can bear in mind it's New Year's Eve. This, so I'm sort of sat. I think I'm going to say it was a Sunday. So I'm sat at home, and. So I did what I'd always do, get the call, log straight onto the mobilising system, familiarise myself with the incident log, work through the incident log, rather than fire control have got their hands full at this time. They don't need to be relaying that to me. I can do that.
They hate that. Every officer rings them and they're like, stop ringing. It's so annoying.
I was like, look, don't, I'll go and read through the log. I'm going, put me on. I'm going to monitor it on I'll monitor it on, so the Liverpool Ops channel, Ops 4, I'm monitoring it, but I'll read through the log and then I'll make my way over. So I'm working through the log. So I've got a sense, that's situation, incident information. Okay. Let's contextualize the whole thing around the decision control process. So incident information. So I know the Liverpool Echo Arena and I know the car park. I know it isn't sprinkled. I know it's got firefighting cores on. It actually turns out there was 4, 1 on each corner. I was only aware of 2 at that point, but I knew at least there was 2 ways of attack, and I knew that we had at least 2 ways that we could make an attack, for the purposes of fire surround. So in my mind, I know all of this, because I know it. I know what, and I know at this point we've got 8 pumps. Now, I don't think they've made up for anything else at this point, but they've made up for 8. And in respect to risk information, I know that we can make a firefighting attack from these cores. So it's for our tactical options, it is the running your length of 50.
When you say cores, sorry, just expand on that.
Apologies, Pete. So a core is a staircase. Mm-hmm. So a staircase, a protected staircase with a dry riser, with a rising main that define right with firefighting outlets on each floor.
Isn't it strange that car parks are better at that than residential premises? And I think it's a financial element to it, because the whole 2 staircase conversation, that they don't want to give up real estate to protected staircases and firefighting protected staircases. Yet in a car parks, there's always at least 2, and they're all really solid, usually concrete, and they've got wet or dry risers. But there's significantly less fire loading, I would argue, and please tell me bullshit, like in a car park. Yes, there's a lot of vehicles, but it's open air, blah, blah, blah. But we don't have that in residential buildings. But yeah, car parks, they usually do have, they're good for access, obviously.
There's actually 4 of these protected staircase. But I'll be honest, full disclosure, I was only aware of 2 at this point. But anyway, I'd made the decision, right, I'm going. So, but I'm familiarising myself with the incident log, and I can see I can see the initial tactics. They've tried an exterior attack, and then they're going they're going with an interior attack, which is fine, no problem with any of that at this point. So I get in my car, I'm hot footing it over there. Just as I get in my car, I monitor on the radio assistance message, make pumps 12. So at that point, they're going to mobilise an area manager, and clearly 4 additional pumps are going. But what I also know is that this isn't now just 12 pumps. You've got the command unit, so that's an extra put. And the reason this is important is because there's the wider consequence issue around the where you've got the impact it actually has on the service, because the number of pumps that were actually, on what's likely to be a busy New Year's Eve. So I'm hot footing it over there, so and I'm monitoring the radio as I go. I turn up and I park up at a reasonable distance away, and all I can see, because the way I'm coming in, you're coming in from the city side, so all you can see is these 2 blocks of flats that are talking about the eastern explosion and the southern explosion, but this horrific glow where you're like something's definitely
poking from round the corner. Something big is going on around there.
Yeah, this horrific glow thing that ain't looking good. But I'm thinking it still looks like that's contained on level 3, because in my mind, I'm thinking, like, my objective here is contain this on level 3. Mm-hmm. Contain it. So the objective is contain it on level 3. The tactical priority, I guess, is the interior attack, because you need to, an exterior, getting aerials up and all that. You cannot be. This is a deep thing. There is a deep penetration required here. So you're going to have to put firefighters in, your BA teams, hose management teams, and we've got to really attack this. And in my mind,
because unconsciously, if you shift that, just in that one, like if you had have decided, oh, I'm scared, look at all that residential, I'm just gonna send a couple of trucks to do an evacuation there. Well, you're taking what is a finite, limited resource under the assumption that this internal, if you move to an external straight away, well, you're accelerating the likelihood that's going to move away from floor 3, and then you're definitely going to be in trouble with your residential, and you're going to need to move to evacuation, versus really focusing in on what is my tactical priority now and putting the predominance of my resource, committing them to that.
Yeah, sorry, Pete. What I should have said is that those flats had already been that would already been passed to me. That the process of evacuation for those flats.
Okay.
Already, apologies, I should have,
In the early stages. No, that's okay.
Bear in mind, I'm going to this on the.
But isn't that an interesting analogy versus, like you say, with high-rise jobs, when we'll push back evacuation because of the stay put, blah blah blah. But with this, the tactical priority, rightfully so, and perhaps they just had better egress with these 4 cores and whatnot. You're like, well, let's get them out early. Again, just an interesting discussion on that quick decision.
Well, I think from memory, what had happened is that the automatic fire detection system in the flats had actuated on multiple levels. Yeah. Which meant that if you take that, and it would have been stay put at that time, would still have been stay put, but because you had multiple, I think I'm right in saying that the AFD would have been operating in almost every flat. So it's sort of.
Well, you'd have had smoke coming in through all the open windows as well, and just triggering alarms everywhere. Yeah.
So I think from memory, I think that is what.
Cool. Okay, take us back. My apology.
So. To give you that sort of sense there initially around objectives, tactical priorities, and sort of control measure tactics, tactical options. Bear in mind, I'm turning up at this point. I'm at the back of my car. I'm getting changed into my fire kit. I'm trying to gather more incident information. You know, the resource information. I know I've got 12 pumps there, and the hazard and risk information in my mind now. It's turning to. Okay, what are the passive measures? Because I know there's no active measures in there. I know there's no smoke control system. I know there's no sprinklers. But in terms of the passive measures, so I'm thinking, I am assuming, as it turns out wrongly, Pete, that's got to be 2-hour fire resistant. That's a big concrete monolith. Got to be 2.
So let's just use that as a useful expansion. Sorry, because again, some people in the very infancy of their careers, an active thing is something that will actuate, like a smoke curtain in a mall or a big shopping centre. There might be smoke curtains that come down to stop the smoke spread. It might be a sprinkler system. These are what we would consider active systems. And then just expand on passive systems again for people that don't want to lose them on that terminology of things that may help them if they are in that premises.
Yeah, so apologies, Pete. So things like the core. A protected staircase, okay. So a staircase which is built in such a way that the fire doors into the it's protected by fire doors. You know, it's 2-hour fire resistant. It is intrinsic within the design of the building, if you like. So it's not. It isn't. Yeah. It's something that is just there because it's there. If that makes sense.
Yep, 100%. Thank you. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drill Book, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, notes and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
I then take the opportunity to do the 360 because I know that the command unit is located at the southerly exposure because I can see it from where I'm parked. So I take the decision that I will walk from the east side to the north, round the west, and then finally to the south side. So I will do the 360 before I get to the command unit because I want to get a feel for, just refresh my, like, this is my knowledge of this, get a good sense, get a good feel for what
Are my eyes matching what my mind was thinking as I was driving towards this thing?
So no assumptions here. I'm confirming all my assumptions. So do me 360, get down to the command unit. And at this point, we've got the group manager is there. He'd made pumps 12, and I think I may even have got there before some of the makeup pumps. So it only took me 15 minutes or so to get there. So I'm there quite quickly. So I'm there reasonably quickly into this job. And as it stands, I'm like, okay, this is what I know. What's changed from, could you, by exception, can you update me from? And he basically said, the guy, group manager Paul Lawless at the time, he's like, yeah, it's that, and we are.
I know Paul. Good
the
guy.
Lawman. He's a solid citizen. Absolutely one of the finest. So I'm very fortunate, and the area manager that came onto the job is a guy called Paul Murphy, who's another top guy as well. So very fortunate that I had some really good officers there with me on the night.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the quick discussion with the lawman, and we're like, okay, you made pumps 12. What I want to see here is then I think I am concerned here around the water supply. I think we are very likely, I think, to be overrunning the supply here. So bear in mind, we are surrounded by, you've got the King's Dock, you've got the Salthouse Dock, you've got the Albert Dock, which is all well and good, but you can't access any of them through standard suction hoses because of the way in which because of the height of the dock walls, the railings and so forth. The only
the 8 metre limitations and stuff like that.
Absolutely, which is a bit like your London example with your 42 metre aerial, which is fantastic unless you can't get it in. It's that sort of thing. So, right. So let's get the HVP here because I know that the Hydra sub we clearly can deploy, and that's going to give us
high volume pump for people that don't know what that is.
So we can deploy that because that's got it's the 40 metre hydraulic hose lines. You can lower it in. The Hydra sub goes in. It's all good, and we can use our essentially we can create a water main that's going to give us 7,000 litres a minute. Let's go with that, okay? Which takes up another pump, of course, but it's needs must. That's part of the tactical plan. And the other tactical option that we agreed we would deploy was the use of CAFs for internal firefighting. So compressed air foam. We got a compressed air foam system that we would run. We would have to run that up through run that up independently of the rising main. So we'd have to set another pump in, would run a CAFS pump in either core. And because we knew that in all likelihood we were going to get running fuel fires. So in order to give us...
Yeah, I've never seen CAFs driven through a riser system. I bet there's a reason you're not allowed to because of the contamination for it. But it wouldn't be an impossible option.
No, you could have done it. The reason we didn't is because it would have meant shutting off the water supply, which clearly we weren't going to do that.
People say things like, we'll switch it off and then we'll just switch over. And then all of a sudden it's taken 20 minutes. Yeah. And you're like, right, no, stop, shit, right, we shouldn't have done this, stop.
And that's why it was right, we'll do it concurrently, not as one replacement for the other. So essentially what we've gone through there is our objective remains. We're going to limit this to the third level. Our tactical priorities then are the deployment of the BA teams with the 52mm attack lines, supplemented then with the CAFs, which arguably then is your control measure tactics. Also supplemented.
I think a lot of people will be familiar with CAFs. Sorry to keep interrupting, but I think every service in the UK has got it, but they might not. So just expand a little bit on why that tactical switch, because we do have a lot of international listeners, and I don't know their level of familiarity with CAFs. Just talk of that as a suppression measure and the sort of benefit risk.
So it's a compressed air foam system. But essentially, the reason why that we were the tactical option of utilising foam in addition to water was because that this was a car park that the predominant fuel is vehicle fires, and therefore it was a reasonable assumption that we were going to get running fuel fires, which clearly deploying a main jet on a straight stream into a running fuel fire is not the best tactical option. So it was to run parallel tactical options to deal with two different classifications of fire, if that makes sense.
You can hit an immediate limitation. Now, I know in Merseyside you have obviously a lot of the national resilience assets, but immediately with that triggers the second decision, because a lot of trucks, A, not all trucks are CAFs, and B, those that are carry 80, 90 litres, not a lot.
So all of the fire appliances were CAFs, so they're all CAFs appliances. Okay. So we and again, you're getting into more some of the logistical
Oh no,
issues
sorry.
But again, it's a fair point, mate. It's a fair point.
Because some people can shout that quickly and go, okay, that's going to last 12 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your plan after that?
I think what we knew is at that point we had 12 pumps worth of CAFs, and if I'll step into our sectorised in a bit if that helps.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Just to deal with some of those more logistical issues, but I guess to the point there to try to. There's the plan, objectives, priorities, control measure tactics. Now clearly, then that we had 2 entry control points. So we were at stage 2BA at this point, 2 entry control points, entry control point Alpha at the South Core, entry control point at the Southwest Core, entry control point Bravo at the Northwest Core, 2 entry control points. So essentially we transition at this point into a BA sector, so main control in old money. And it was then a case of resourcing that by way of making sure that we had sufficient numbers of wearers, and then dealing with some of the other logistical issues, like, for example, the provision of CAFs and so forth. But what happened very quickly is so that's the plan, right? Lawman, stick with that. I'm going to convene a TC, so an on-scene tactical coordination group. I'm going to have that powwow with our multi-agency partners, and I'm going to explain to them that's our that's our objective, that's our priorities, and get a sense here on, okay, so from a policing perspective, what does that mean consequence-wise? And I will use the opportunity to talk about sort of an SCG and Fire and Rescue Service sort of contribution in that space. But then bring together our multi-agency partners to ensure that the immediate consequences on scene are dealt with, because there are some significant issues there. We've got however many, 5 or 6,000 people plus a load of horses 50 metres away in the Liverpool Echo Arena. We are slap bang in the middle of the Docklands, on New Year's Eve. We've got, I think there was something like 1,400 cars in the car park. That's 1,400 people who can't get the vehicles, who may have travelled from all around the country for the horse show. There was all manner of complexity there, as you can think about. So, but fundamentally, at the first TC Tactical Coordination Group, what we basically looked at is, okay, fast time actions. We are going to, our tactical plan here is we will attempt to confine the fire to level 3. That's what we're going to attempt to do here. That's because if we do that, then yes, clearly the car park is out of use, and yes, we're going to have issues with decanting vehicles out and such like, and certainly from above the third floor, that may not be possible, but it's possible that maybe we can get vehicles out from the second floor, or whatever it may be, and all issues sort of for police around the public order space, clearly local authority, lots of people who may have no means of transport to get back home, may have to stay in the city. All of those consequence issues. But we're like, look, fundamentally, that's what we're going to aim to do. We need to make a decision over does the evening show go ahead? Because you've got another 5,000 people coming for that.
Yes.
So, it's 1,800, whatever it was, 1,800 hours now. So basically what I said is, we'll reconvene at 18:30, by which time, at that point, we will make a decision over...
Who's present at this TCG?
Police, ambulance service, Liverpool Echo Arena, and we'd requested...
Right, you did, you had them there.
So we'd requested Liverpool City Council at this point.
Because again, it's knowing the priorities of those in the room. Airport examples are always a good one of this, because the Echo Arena, they will have their own priorities aligned to their business and whatnot. Totally understandable, but that decision is going to have a big impact on them. And there's also like the argument of, well, can you make that decision? It's my business. If I choose to run it, I choose to run it. Not that people are ever that belligerent in a TCG, I'm sure, but these are big consequences, costly for some people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the fact that you had the Geordies in immediately to the north with all manner of New Year's Eve parties planned. There was I forget the name of the hotel, which is just to the southwest of which we ended up using for our multi-agency meetings. But again, it's New Year's Eve, Pete. It was never a great time for an incident like this, but this definitely wasn't a great time for it. There's no doubt about it. But the point being is, and I can't remember the exact detail, but it was, look, these are the fast time actions, and we'll reconvene at 18:30, we'll make the call. Because at that point, I feel I will be better placed. Because if we are going to get on top of this, we're going to do it in the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. What's the effect of all that masses of foam from 2 or 3 attack points? What was it looking like? Do you know what I mean? How effective it would be?
Realistically, are we going to be able to? And depending on the position of the car, does it affect the staircase? There was all manner of issues. Anyway, as we're just concluding the TCG, the evacuation whistles start sounding. And there's this horrific sort of crashing noise, and then we're totally enveloped in smoke. We were at the back of our command units. We're just all day enveloped in smoke, and I'm like, okay.
Did your arse drop out a little bit?
Be back here at 18:30. This doesn't look good. I need to go and see what's going on. So what had happened is, the BA teams deployed onto the third floor. So BA teams, I think that we had something like Alpha 1, 2 and 3 were in, Bravo 1 and 2, I think. So we had 3 in from the Alpha, 2 in from the Bravo.
So we maybe got 10 wearers operating off 4 or 5 jets.
Something like that, plus some external jets going in. And what had happened is, what they basically said is, there's a car's just crashed down from the 4th floor. It's just crashed down into the from the 4th floor. And what turned out, and again, going back to some of my assumptions here, I'm assuming this is 2-hour fire resistance. What it actually turns out is, the flooring was actually 15-minute fire resistant. New one on me. I didn't realise that. So effectively what had happened is the integrity of the flooring was completely compromised. The cars start dropping down from the 4th floor.
15 minutes? 15 minutes. What's that, just a thin concrete floor?
Essentially, yeah. So it's...
Wow.
You've got your rebar plus your...
Yeah.
Plus your concrete.
That's astonishing. Imagine again if they were like EV vehicles and the heat sort of loss that they would have. Wow, that would go fast.
The other issue you had as well, which again after the fact, not something that we knew at the time, was the drainage gullies for the water runoff, because it was open sided. They were made of aluminium, and the downpipes were plastic, which of course failed almost immediately. So there was a complete absence of compartmentation. So my assumptions around the compartment, because my thinking was we could limit this to level 3, clearly was fundamentally flawed. That was never going to happen. But I was basing on my knowledge, my thought at that point, because whilst we had
how buildings used to be built,
whilst we had
not building on the cheap,
well, but the argument would be that it met with the building regs for a car park, which in the argument would be everyone got out, which they did, So in that case, the 15 minutes I think is around. It gives people sufficient time to make the way to a core, to a staircase, and to get out. So I think from memory that's the rationale. But of course, my assumption, wrongly, and we didn't have SSRI on this, which clearly was an omission again. And as Chief Fire Officer, I've got to wear that one, because ultimately that one does rest with me. But of course, once that happens, we're like, okay, I'm back to the lawman, and at this point, Paul Murphy's rocked up as well. We're like, okay, we are not clearly, based on what's just happened, we are clearly not going to save. We have to now assume at this, but the window of opportunity is gone. What we will now prioritise. So again, the objective now is like, we just need to contain this to the car park itself. The tactical priorities now are that we protect the south and easterly 7-storey flat exposures, plus juries in at the north, the north exposure. But our operational tactics at this point think, right, we now need to reevaluate because if you think I'm dropping back into my situation domain, so the incident information now is no longer several vehicles on fire. This is now a 7-storey premise fully involved in fire with exposures. So the situation, the incident has now changed in my mind. It's now shifted. So what we did, I make up for an additional 2 HVPs, and the knowledge it's probably going to take another hour, 2 hours for them to get there. But we're playing a longer game now.
You've only got one as a regional resource. You've got one permanently in Merseyside, haven't you? But for a lot of services, they won't have one themselves. No. These are national assets.
So we were called, because I asked Fire Control, I said, can you get me the ETAs, please? Because I want to build that into me tactical plan, in respect of realistically, when can we start? When the tactical priorities, then let's prioritise them based on what we can actually achieve and when.
Yeah.
So what we then did was to made up for some additional aerials as well, because again, we're now into exposure protection. But what we did was to deploy into the 7-storey flats, use the dry risers, charge the risers, and then deployed attack lines into the flats that directly faced onto the car park, and deployed direct straight stream attack lines in from the flats into the
right.
Which
did you have the you seen those below whatever they're called, branches where they reach them out the wind, floor below? We haven't got them in the UK, have we? But also, sorry, we skipped over for a second. Evacuate all. So whistles were going. So everyone, because firstly, it's a thank God no firefighter was crushed underneath that bloody falling vehicle. Did everyone evacuate the stairwells? Did everyone have to completely get out? Because again, then there's a fire, no one's attacking any fire at all.
So we did. You're right, Pete. You're absolutely right. So at that point, we did, because I was at the TCG at that point. I was reacting to the whistles, which quite rightly, the BA crews did all then evacuate back into the stairs, and we called them out to do the roll call to account for everyone.
That stuff isn't quick either. So the turnaround of that, and then the decision to either get somebody back in there or come up with a tactical plan quickly, because nothing's happening now. Everyone's just doing that, oh my God, did anyone get crushed? Is everyone okay? Roll call.
Yeah, that probably, look, I'm going to say, based on the timeline, there was that probably took at least 10 minutes to get that sort of the full accountability, because we did go ahead.
I think we're a bit better at that in the UK, because I've spoke to some American firefighters, and when they do a roll call, it can take a very long time because they don't know where the bloody hell everybody is sometimes. Whereas with us, with our sectorisation approach to stuff, every sector commander should have a very solid understanding of who's in their sector.
Well, the entry control point supervisor was our immediate go-to, so straight away, as you know, we know what our accountability system is. It is robust, and it is extremely, it is extremely good. And they all react to the evacuation signal. Yes, they leave they left it. I think they withdrew to the core, left the branches in situ, really switched on the way in which they did that. It wasn't just a case of dropping the branches and hot-footing it out.
Yeah.
So, it was a textbook evacuate, no problem whatsoever with any of that.
Sorry, I just realised we skipped over it a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, Peter, and I guess I'm sort of trying to keep it in.
Because a lot of people won't ever experience one of them. But I know we're sticking to the framework of moving back into those tactical priorities.
But no, you're absolutely right, because clearly then the immediate tactical priority is firefighter safety and accountability, which clearly was, and that clearly was. And I'm pleased for any listener don't think that wasn't the immediate priority. It absolutely was.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm just, as you say, we're trying to keep this around the...
Yes, we're keeping it the incident command model of where your mind is at, yeah.
But absolutely, that was, take that as a given, that was done as the absolute priority. But then very quickly, the resetting of those priorities and redeploying those people in the way that I've described then because the concern was, as you say, like, we haven't put water on this for 10, 15 minutes, and clearly it is developing rapidly, and we need to... We need to get a grip, and we need to get the momentum back. And that's
so we've redeployed back into the flats. We've tapped into the risers. We're attacking it from above.
We're actually attacking it from the same level, Pete.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, they are in the living room of the flat that faces out towards the car park. So they are directing the jet on a straight stream at any fire that they can see.
CAFs has had to have gone now, unfortunately.
We've at this point the CAFs never actually got deployed, Pete.
That's what I'm saying, because this stuff takes a little while as well.
The CAFs never actually...
To get a good flow of an effective foam, it's not as quick as people think it is, unless you've got a really good pump operator, especially if you're stretching whatever that would have been, 5 or 6 lines. It's not going to be quick.
And it did not ever get deployed. So what was deployed was the 52 mil attack lines from either corps, and then there were the hand lines, the 70 mil hand lines for the exterior attack. So they were actually deployed. The CAFs never actually got deployed, so we didn't actually get to that point when the evacuation sounded. Then it was the BA wearers, so team, I think it was Alpha 2 and 3, I'm going to say, were still in, and Bravo 1 and 2, and they thankfully they were relatively close to the core, the point of exit, if you like. So
this is what makes it such an interesting dynamic, perhaps case study, because like you say, for incident commanders, okay, that's your plan, and you're 4/10 of the way through your plan. Bang, it's changed, can't do that, scrap it, what's your next? And people are like, oh, but that was my plan. It's a very dynamic situations, aren't they? And sometimes you just never quite achieve. Thatches are always a great example. Like, say you have this idea of a fire break. That ain't a quick thing to do.
No, and look, even putting control lines in, not a quick, nothing, and there's always that delay between you making that decision and the thing actually happening. I think the point here is, Pete, to use the decision control process. It's an iterative thing. So something changes, you go back to situation, you start writing incident information. Really good example would be Grenfell, wouldn't it? It's transitioned from a compartment fire to an exterior fire spreading at rapid rate out the outside of the building. Your incident's changed. Therefore, your thinking needs to change with that.
So we've gone through loads of different tactical priority shifts there. I love the aspect of having the boots on the ground visuals of it. So we've spoken a little around TCGs. Why the decision to have senior leadership at the incident ground? Because there's so many more aspects. I'd love us to actually come on another call. I know we're conscious on time today, but talk to us about the usefulness of having senior leaders on the incident ground, if you still feel that is a value.
Look, it was just, it was my preference, Pete, and I'm not, I guess, having sat in numerous strategic coordination groups, and bear in mind, there was an SCG convened we declared a major incident. One of the first things I did was to declare a major incident after getting on scene at the Echo Arena fire. Now, having sat on numerous SCGs myself, it is my view, and I'm not suggesting that this is the way. This is just my view, that the Fire and Rescue Service had relatively limited skin in the game at the Strategic Coordination Group, which is fundamentally is concerned with managing the consequences of the incident, rather necessarily than the incident itself.
It's the aftermath and the recovery, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the recovery, theoretically, the recovery coordination should run in parallel or should start at the same time as you're managing the response. The recovery coordination group should almost be running parallel. The point I make is the fire itself in this instance is that which has given rise to the consequence, but the consequences in the strategic sense are things like the impact on the nighttime economy on New Year's Eve, having 5,000 people who might not be able to get home. And the Fire and Rescue Service doesn't have a great deal of skin in that particular game. In truth, nor does the ambulance service. Because even the impact, let's say it was a multi-casualty incident. Yes, there's an issue for the ambulance service in sort of managing the immediate response to that, but actually the consequence to that is in the health system, isn't it? Is the hospitals and the primary care facilities that then are receiving those people. So for me, I always felt that, I'm going to go to the job and I'm going to resolve the job, because the quicker you resolve the job, the quicker the consequences is
put the problem out, and then we can all stop talking about the problem because you solved the problem.
That might sound really arrogant, like suggesting that my colleagues.
No, but it is a rare. Yeah, your colleagues can do it, but it hasn't always got to be the chief fire officer that attends the SCG. It depends where their skill set are, because you'll know better than me. But we have a lot of senior leaders and CEOs, CFOs coming in from different sectors. So there will be a different deployment of skill sets in different incidents, certainly major incidents, in where's your skill set best served. And you're quite rare in the studies that you've done and your knowledge, but the predominance are probably still people that have come from the fire ground up. I would say they're still the predominance of senior leaders.
Yeah, I think you're right to say that. And look, I think it was always my preference to do that. I felt it was a good leadership thing, and I felt in the broader, the broader leadership of the service, and actually focusing on what we're here for, being a good fire and rescue service. I would never claim that I was popular. I'm sure I wasn't, but I would like to think that I was at least acknowledged. Well, you can put a fire out, which would, I think, would possibly
that authenticity and credibility aspect of it. I always like it when the senior leader comes to the incident ground personally. Some people feel like they're being checked on. I like it. It means that they care, they've got skin in the game, and they're here with us, where it's part of a team.
And look, this is probably another discussion for us to have at
yes, yeah.
But I think there is operational competence, which is being able to turn up at a major incident and run the job. There is sitting at an SCG, which is something else. Now I had a discussion with an individual from the military. I won't name names here. I had a discussion with an individual who was said had some exposure to working in strategic coordination groups, and I thought that maybe you could do like a 1-week magic multi-agency gold incident command course, and then with all the experience from the military, then that would then be sufficient to be a fire and rescue service gold commander, a strategic commander. And I think my thought there was, well, I'm absolutely sure you could sit at the SCG and competently engage there, but actually it would be the equivalent, as we'll use the military analogy, say, of taking a chief fire officer with all of their experience, giving them a week's training at Sandhurst, and then asking them to lead a battalion attack. I'll give you an example to take Colonel H. Jones's. It's 42 years since Tupad had attacked Goose Green. So right, there's your objective: go and attack Goose Green. I'm not really sure after a week you'd be in a position to do that. Respectfully. So,
yeah, I agree. I know.
And I'm not saying that there isn't a load of transferability of skills here. And I think sitting at an SCG is one thing. Running a job is something very, very different. And I can say that with absolute authority because I've done both.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying
you're too close to the tactical consequences on the incident ground. And you need to have a conceptual understanding of the required resources and the effect of what you're asking people to do.
Completely. And the only way you get that piece, that's why I go back to the earlier point I make, in order to be able to successfully resolve a big incident, I think you've got to be able to successfully resolve the little incidents. I just don't think there's no shortcuts here. I think in the operational space, I'm not talking necessarily about the wider leadership of the organisation, but I do think that one gives you the credibility to do the other, particularly when you're dealing with some of the more challenging industrial matters that have to be dealt with in the fire and rescue service. So, and again, this is probably for another conversation, but.
Mate, I totally agree. I think the culture stuff and the leadership stuff, lots of transferable skills. Lots we can learn from military, lots we can learn from business, lots we can learn from sport. But some of these elements, when you are actually boots on the ground, need a much more holistic. And like you just said, there is no shortcuts. And in a world where we are encouraging rapid development, rapid promotion, and because of the hemorrhaging of skill sets and retirement, that is becoming an ever-growing challenge for people to try and solve. And my sincere hope is that people, obviously a lot of people will listen in on this, but people really get a respect and understanding for, we're not just romanticizing and ego massaging and all that jazz. There's some real fundamental reasons why you do need to have a good, strong foundational knowledge of these sorts of things on the incident ground. I know we've both got commitments this morning, so I'm going to wrap us up there, Dan, but I always love our conversations together, brother. I sincerely hope we can have a few more over the coming months, because I think there's loads of really little niches we could jump into that we've probably only dipped our toe in today's conversation. But really appreciate you coming on again, brother, and have a great day.
Thanks, Pete.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognise, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.